Etana was a king of Kish who could not father a son to inherit his throne, and the only cure, a mythical plant that granted birth, grew somewhere in the heavens themselves, out of reach of any mortal man. His one hope of reaching it was an eagle he found dying at the bottom of a pit, wings and talons torn out, left there to starve as punishment for breaking an oath. This is one of the oldest flight stories human beings ever told, inscribed on cuneiform tablets in Mesopotamia over 4,000 years ago, so old that the ending itself has crumbled away with the clay it was written on. What survives is still enough to tell you exactly what a king was willing to do and who he was willing to trust to give his kingdom a future he could not give it alone. Here is the story the tablets still remember. Kish was said to be the first city where kingship descended from heaven after a great flood had scoured the earth clean, and Etana ruled it as a good and capable king, except for the one thing every king of that world was measured by. He had no son. No heir meant no continuation, no dynasty, no guarantee that everything he had built would outlive him. He prayed to the sun god Shamash for help, and Shamash, moved by his devotion, told him of a plant that existed far above the world in the heavens themselves, a plant of birth, capable of granting Etana the child he could not otherwise conceive. But no mortal had ever gone there, no mortal had a way to. The eagle's story began separately, and it began with a promise. An eagle and a serpent had struck a pact, sworn before Shamash himself to share their hunting grounds and raise their young side by side on the branches and roots of the same great tree. The eagle's nest in the high branches, the serpent's den among the roots. For a time it worked exactly as promised. Then the eagle broke it. Hungry and unwilling to wait for the hunt, the eagle flew down while the serpent was away and devoured its young. When the serpent returned to a nest stripped bare, it wept before Shamash and demanded justice for an oath witnessed and broken. Shamash answered. He told the serpent to hide inside the carcass of a wild bull, and when the eagle inevitably came to feed on the corpse, to strike. The eagle took the bait. The serpent seized it, tore out its wings feather by feather, ripped away its talons, and threw it into a deep pit to die slowly of thirst and exposure, a punishment that fit the crime exactly. An oath-breaker, stripped of the very power it had abused. Shamash heard the eagle's cries from the bottom of the pit and did not intervene directly. An oath had been broken, and the God who witnessed it wasn't in the business of undoing a fair punishment. But he was, at that very moment, also listening to a different prayer. A king, still asking for a way to reach the plant of birth. Shamash gave Etana his answer by pointing him toward the pit. "Go there," he said. "Help the one you find, and you will have found your way to heaven." Etana climbed down into the pit and found the eagle exactly as the god had described. Broken, featherless, reduced to nothing, and certain it was about to die. It begged him for food rather than trusting a stranger's mercy at first, unable to believe anyone would help a creature already condemned by the gods for breaking its word. Etana fed it anyway, brought it meat day after day, and stayed with it through the slow, unglamorous work of healing. Months of new feathers growing in one at a time, of muscle and strength returning to wings that had been torn out at the root. When the eagle could finally fly again, it did not simply leave. It had incurred a debt it intended to repay, and Etana had a request only a creature that had touched the sky could fulfill. "Carry me to heaven, to the gate of the gods, so I can find the plant that will give me a son." The eagle agreed without hesitation. Whatever it had been before the pit, an oath-breaker, a predator that took what wasn't offered, it understood now, more clearly than most gods ever bothered to teach it, exactly what it meant to be given a second chance it hadn't earned. They rose together, Etana clinging to the eagle's back, the eagle beating its newly regrown wings harder than it ever had before the pit, climbing past the clouds toward a sky no human being had ever seen from this angle. As they climbed, the eagle kept narrating what it saw below, and the vision is the part of this 4,000-year-old story that still stops people cold. The earth shrinking beneath them, the vast land becoming a garden, the garden becoming a bread oven, the sea around it narrowing to the width of a farmer's irrigation ditch, until finally the whole world, every city, every king, every war Etana had ever fought or feared, was small enough to vanish entirely from view. It is one of the earliest surviving descriptions in human writing of what the world looks like from the air. Long before anyone could test whether it was true, someone in Mesopotamia had already imagined it in exact and specific stages and put it in a story about a king who needed a son badly enough to trust a stranger's wings. They climbed past the gates of Anu, Enlil, and Ea, the great triad of Mesopotamian sky gods, approaching the throne of Ishtar herself, Queen of Heaven, keeper of the very thing Etana had crossed the sky to find. This is the point in the story where the surviving tablets begin to break apart. The clay is damaged here in every copy that has ever been recovered, cracked, incomplete, eroded by 4,000 years of burial, so that no scholar today can say with total certainty exactly what happened at the gates, or exactly how Etana asked, or exactly what Ishtar said back. What the tablets do preserve, in fragments scattered across several different ancient copies recovered from different cities, is a moment of doubt at the very edge of success. Etana, this high above the world, suddenly terrified by the height itself. The story breaking into panicked fragments about falling, about the eagle no longer being visible beneath him, about the ground rushing back up faster than it fell away when they first climbed. Some versions suggest the flight failed here, that fear undid what courage had built, and the two of them plummeted back toward the earth together. But this isn't where later Mesopotamian tradition remembers the story ending. The Sumerian king list, a real historical document, not a myth, used by actual scribes to record the lineage of actual rulers, names Etana as a historical king of Kish and names his son and successor, Bali. Whatever happened at the gate of heaven, whatever the damaged clay can no longer fully tell us, the kingdom got its heir. The line continued. A man who could not father a son on his own somehow did, and the only explanation Mesopotamian scribes ever wrote down for how was this: the flight, the eagle, the plant of birth, however it actually ended. Modern scholars still argue about which fragments belong to which version, which ending is the true one, whether the fall was real or only a moment of fear resolved off the page we no longer have. The story itself, quite literally, will not resolve. The clay simply isn't there anymore to tell us. What we're left with is the flight itself, proven, vivid, specific down to the shrinking width of the sea below them, and a king list that insists, however it happened, that it worked. Strip away the missing ending, and what's left is still one of the strangest, most human stories to survive from the ancient world. Not a tale of a hero storming heaven by force, but of a king who could do nothing alone, and an animal that owed him everything, and the two of them succeeding only because each one, at the moment it mattered, chose to trust the other with something as fragile as a debt, or a set of newly regrown wings, or a single human life 4,000 feet above the ground. The eagle broke an oath and paid for it in feathers and blood. Etana had no power to force heaven to give him anything. Neither one of them got where they were going by strength. They got there because a broken creature was shown mercy it hadn't earned, and repaid it with the one thing it had left to give. Somewhere in a damaged clay tablet, buried for 4,000 years before anyone dug it back up, A scribe wrote down the exact moment the whole world became small enough to disappear beneath two travelers who had no business being in the sky at all, and even with the ending gone, that image is the one that survived. Subscribe if you want more. See you in the next one.